Here we are in your hometown, sharing looks as the sun goes down. Just a breath until our next kiss. Never knew of a love like this. A love like baby, still loving like crazy, praying that it never ends. Yeah, you and me, darling, we've really got something the world just can't understand. Yeah, it's you and me, falling in love every day till we're both owning gray. Yeah, it's you and me, as long as we live, I'll never know a love like this.
What's up, everybody? Welcome to Create with Maxon. I'm Chad Perkins here. Thank you for being here, for your kind words. And we even have Jen Van Horn, who you just saw in the video in the audience. What's up, Jen? What's up, everybody? Thanks so much for being here. I'm your host, Chad Perkins. I'm also here with Hashi and Todd behind the scenes, who are invisible. There they are. Joined by Hashi here, who you know from VFX Chill, and we have our very special guest, Todd Sheridan Perry, who is a VFX supervisor and has worked on a lot of your favorite movies. And welcome, guys. It's good to see you.
Thanks, Chad.
Good to see you all.
Here.
Thank you, Chad.
I'm gonna do the housekeeping stuff, you know, like the standard intro, and then I will stop doing that. And we'll get to the important stuff. We have a link here. Hashi, would you mind sharing this link with the people for this this page here? This is kind of like, you know, the housekeeping we do at the beginning of every episode. To answer your question, yes, this episode will be recorded and it will be live on the Trading Team YouTube. Also, you can go to maxon.net/events to see events like these that are happening all the time. They're free. And also you can see the events that we're going to be attending live if you want to meet us in person. Also, Cineversity.com is a great place to go for free education, for more tools and such. And also notice in the download or in the description, you'll also see download links. You can get project files for some of the stuff that we'll be covering in the sessions this month. I think that's it. I always suck at housekeeping. I'm sorry, everybody. I feel like when I do housekeeping, I'm just like, and it's just like really sloppy and doesn't make sense. So that's done.
No, it was great.
Thanks, man. I appreciate that. So let's get to goods. This is what we're here for. We're going to talk to Todd about his amazing career. I know Todd from the Visual Effects Society, which is why I pushed to get into the Visual Effects Society so I could rub shoulders with people like Todd. And then since then, I've been able to like chat with him and go out to dinner and hang out. And I've learned so much from him and his workflow and just the way he approaches things. It's just like such an inspiring thing. So thank you so much for taking time out of your schedule, Todd. I know you're doing some insane things. Tell us a little bit about like yourself and about like your like the stuff that you do, the projects you've been involved in. Give us like a little like nutshell of
nutshell of the 30-year nutshell. Right now, we're on the 5th season of For All Mankind, and we just wrapped shooting that in December. And at the same time, we're developing the spin-off of For All Mankind, which, if you don't know, For All Mankind, the premise is what would have happened to the space race and culture and society and technology if the Soviet Union had landed on the moon first and the space race just never ended. And so Star City, which is the spinoff, will be taking us back to season 1 of For All Mankind, but we'll be telling the story from the Soviet Union's point of view. And that is shooting in Lithuania. That just started shooting this week. And so myself and then Jay Red, who's the senior supervisor on the show, we are working with another supervisor in Lithuania. So we're checking in with Lithuania at night and in the early morning, and then we're supervising on For All Mankind during the day, and just juggling all of that stuff. That's what I'm on currently. And then last year, I worked on a show for Amazon called I'm a Virgo, which is directed by Boots Riley, and Boots really, really digs the visual effects that we were doing before we had computers and so forth. So we had a 12-foot character, and there were no digi-doubles, there were no CG versions of him. It was all either forced perspective gags or miniatures or swapping out puppets or occasionally compositing. And I think we had a dab of CG in there to help things, but mostly it was effects work that we had been doing for the past 100 years. Just
wow.
Redoing that.
Well, I'm a Virgo specifically because I follow your like Facebook page where you talk about movies, and you always have like these really cool insights. Mildly stalking. I mean, nothing that we want to call the police over or anything, but you know, I'm a fan. And you know, you mentioned I'm a Virgo. I watched it. I fell in love with that show. I can't recommend it enough for those of you out there in the audience. If you've never seen I'm a Virgo on Prime, it's so good. It's not just the cool effects. It's also a great show. And how do you do a show like that has tons of like in-camera tricks like that? Like, how do you supervise? Are you brought things and then say like, actually we could do this in camera? Like, I don't know that much about like doing in-camera gags, like the old like matte paintings where they line the shot up just right. Like, yeah. I don't know that much about that kind of stuff. So I'd be kind of at a loss if I was to be asked how to do stuff like that.
Yeah, it feels like voodoo. Because we just don't know how to do that anymore, because we have tools that make it so much easier. But it was the impetus from Boots to say, I don't want the visual, I don't want the CG stuff. I want it to look like this, and I don't mind seeing the seams of that. So if it looks a little puppety, that's okay, which I'm totally on board with, because I think that any movie can be made better if you throw Muppets into it. So if you had to go back to the knowledge that from whence we came, and every shot was, how do we do this practically first? Not me going, well, you know what, we could do this practically. It was them going, we need to do this practically. How are we going to do it? And part of it was the math of it all. And my associate supervisor was Scott Curvin, and he came from Blur and developed the Brazil renderer, and then became a supervisor unto himself. And in the meantime, he started a brewery in Washington as well. But I knew he knew the math. I knew he knew that side of it. So he was my math guy, and doing the force perspective, like, this is the scale that he needs to be in, and this is where his eye lines are going to be. But a lot of the times when we were cramped into spaces, because we were shooting on location, we didn't have wild balls or anything like that. We couldn't modify the location. So we did a rudimentary scan of the location, and then we started prevising in the computer in either Unreal or any other 3D tools. I think some of us were using Maya, some of us were using Max. But it was basically, can we do this shot in forced perspective with the space limitations that we have? So we prevised the forced perspective shot to ensure that we could actually accomplish the shot. And
wow.
And so we were still using our technology. We were still using the tools that we have. We were just kind of using it inversely. And then our puppet guys, Alec Gillis and his team were also using new technologies to do the old school stuff. So they sculpt in ZBrush and do concepts in ZBrush, and then they use that to 3D print the models, and then they use the 3D print of it to make the molds, and then they make the puppet out of that. So it's kind of and putting it out to the front of it.
That is the coolest workflow I've ever heard. That's amazing. They would make the puppets in ZBrush and print them out for models to help with the perspective. That is so cool.
It's a wild. It's wonderful to see people embrace, a wide range of VFX techniques, because they're always it's such a cool world of ways to create things that.
And it was a great collaboration that I don't think is emphasized enough in movies and visual effects. In the Academy, visual effects is all of the visual effects. It's the special effects, it's the animatronics, it's the CG effects, it's the stunt work, gag stuff that the Corbo brothers do. All of that is visual effects, and in I'm a Virgo, we were all working together for the same end. So we had Alec Gillis's team, and then we had 3210 making the miniatures of things, and then we had us on the digital side, kind of helping seam those things together. But if we didn't work together, we wouldn't have been able to accomplish what we did. But that happens always on the sets, and there seems to be this fight between that's a false fight. That people say, well, no, the practical stuff is better and the CG stuff is better, and it's like, no, we all of us working together make it the best that it is. It's not a this one or this one. It's a this one and this one come together.
It seems like if there's like a fight between like writing and acting, like the writing is what matters. No, acting is what matters. It's like
it's everyone.
No, like they work together and they Right.
That arm is just
like, look at that. What the heck? Good gravy. Goodness sake. Movie magic. That's the whole idea. You get to go into this magical theater box and step into
so he's a puppet in the foreground on that shot, and then we're shooting up, but in the back is a digital map painting to put him into the scene, and that was a logistical thing. We had to do that as a pickup, and so if you could scroll forward just a little or backwards, just to play that, and then just stop when we're looking up at him. Nope, we missed it. Anyway. So we're still blending stuff together. So we did a scan of that building right there. Stop. So we did a scan of the building, and then we put the camera in place where we would actually be shooting him to see what part of the building and what part of the poles and everything we would be seeing. And then he was shot later on the location. And then, so the background is just really a matte painting using some 3D stuff as the foundation to get the perspective right. And then we did some photography as well. And then we put that all together to make sure that, and then our character in the front is a half-scale puppet of the actor that he's
switching it up.
Yeah,
keeps people on their toes, suspends the disbelief.
Yeah,
that is amazing.
And I could talk about this all day, but we want to talk about Red Giant, right?
Yeah. I was just about to say, sorry for the distraction, but thank you so much. And thanks, Hashi, for finding that stuff in the background.
It's a crazy amount of work. Yeah.
Yeah, that show, I can't recommend it enough. It's not just the effects, though. Like, the show itself is a great show. It has great heart, and it's really cool. But anyways, I could get off the I'm a Virgo kick. I just thank you so much for sharing with us about that show. That's awesome.
Totally. And then the thing that I want to talk about now is Tim Travers, which I worked with you on. You had some shots on there as well. And we did that last Christmas.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Because what a thing to do at Christmas time is working on shots. And it premiered at SIFF last spring, and now it's going to be on streaming platforms coming this April. And we'll play the trailer for you. But to preface it, Tim Travers is a really low budget movie that was shot over in Spokane by the guys who kind of led up Z Nation, if anybody else saw that. And they just had hundreds of shots in this movie, and you'll see why. And they just had such a minimal budget, but I love these scrappy little productions that are trying to do big things with the resources they have. And the reason why I like working with them, I mean, I love working on the big shows that have budgets and resources. So like For All Mankind or on Marvel stuff, you just have these vast resources and you can just kind of do things over and over and over again. When you have such limited resources, but you have good ideas, it's a matter of being smart about how you plan the visual effects. Because in my theory, I don't think it's my theory alone, but if it's already out there, I agree with it. And that is the most amount of money that is wasted in production as well as in visual effects is indecision. And so when you have a lot of money, you can go, well, I don't like this, or I don't like this, or we're going to kick this down. I'm not going to answer this now. Well, can you give me 5 versions of this and I'll choose one? Those types of things make things very, very expensive. And so I like working with these small productions from time to time because we can look at the script and we can look at the ideas that the director has and go, how can we shoot this really effectively with the resources that we have to make it work? And then if we can make those choices and live with those choices, then we can make something cool. And that ties in with I'm a Virgo, with Boots. He is willing to make creative choices and then live with those choices that end up on camera, and with very, very little noodling to what we had. So if things look puppety, it was fine. It was like, I want to feel that this thing is real. I don't need it to be perfect. And so with this Tim Travers thing, we did have J.D. McHugh was the visual effects supervisor, and he had enough insight from working on Z Nation and commercials and so forth to shoot these things properly. So, or relatively properly anyway. So we had the foundation of things that we could work with, but we had to work fast and we had to work smart because there were just so many shots to do, and a lot of them were really, really ambitious. And so working with these guys at these lower budgets is great because you have a little bit more creative input into the process. And these filmmakers these small filmmakers grow up to be big filmmakers. And if you help them with their vision, if you help them be the artist that they want to be, then it kind of helps everyone. And so I do like taking on these smaller shows because I like to see people realize their visions. I want to see people realize their dreams of being an artist because it's hard. And so they need just as much help as anybody else. So we take the lessons we learn from the big shows when we have the latitude to make mistakes, and then we can take that and we can go to the small shows and we can say, you know what, if we did this would make this a lot easier to accomplish these shots. So should I just play this trailer and then we can get into the shot?
Sure. Go ahead and reshare, and I'll make sure to put you up here.
All right. So
and share sound if you would like it.
Yes, I would like it.
Excellent. And in the meantime, a lot of wonderful people in the chat here. Thank you all so much. Feel free to give us your questions for Todd or about productions and just in general.
And Chad, if you guys could watch those comments, I am not, or else I would just simply be distracted and not be talking.
Oh yeah, we got you. We got you. We'll take care of that.
Okay, so I'm gonna go over. Is that sharing now?
There we go.
Let's get right into it. Dr. Tim Travers, tell us exactly what the time traveler's paradox is. First, a scientist makes a time machine. Moves back exactly 1 minute into the past. Then the scientist kills his younger self. Now you have a man who should not, cannot exist, yet somehow does.
With full love and respect, I hope you die a very painful death.
How weird was your day?
Today, I activated a time machine that is powered by nuclear materials that were stolen from a terrorist organization. Is this all about the stolen plutonium?
Yeah, it's about the plutonium.
This whole mad scientist shtick, it's like performance art. I'm just waiting for the cameras to pop out.
I mean, maybe that was just some other woman that looked a lot like her. Just a little weird that murder was her go-to response.
Well, there's more than one of him. He might be immortal. He might be a god, man.
How the hell do you forget about plutonium?
Oh, I right. It's been a weird day.
Weird, confusing, really, really stupid.
I entangled and stored particles massed into the physical space of a door, invented time travel, and then just found a new way to create black holes. So cut me some slack.
You'd have to be insane to observe this and think that you somehow had relevance.
Earlier tonight, I met a guy who looked exactly like you. Power core stable. No, we're gonna die.
Just have one of those faces, I guess. If God actually exists, then I'm out.
Hey, everybody.
Woo!
Lovely.
All right, so I'm going to just get into this and talk about one of the shots that that I worked on, and that is one of the Tims. So you saw that Tim Travers just keeps on making multiples of himself, and eventually things go a bit chaotic, and things are catching on fire. And there's this shot of one of the Tims running around, and he gets caught on fire in a comedic way. And so I was shown this shot. This is the post viz of the shot to get the idea of what it should be. And so you can see that they shot this, and they have this light behind the time device here that shines on him, so that we get at least a little bit of some reactive light on him and on the background and so forth to give some light on here. So I had to look at this and say, okay, well, what is the fastest way and most effective way that we can accomplish this shot? And so I knew that we were going to have to match move Tim Travers here. because the fire in itself, he's going to be on fire, so we need something to emit the fire from, and he's going to be moving around a lot, and we have the fire around him, so his movements need to not only be emitting the fire, but they need to be advecting the fire and the smoke around him. So we need some kind of 3D thing to interact with the fire itself. So the fluid simulation, and I didn't know exactly how I was going to approach the fluid simulation. I'm not an effects artist. I kind of know how it works, but I'm not very good at putting it all together. I don't know all of the bells and whistles and so forth.
Now, just a quick question from our chat. For this one, were you on set for filming?
I was not on set. This was JD McKee supervising all of this stuff. So for all of the artists that were working with it, it was kind of like, here's what we shot, and we did this, and we shot a ball pass, and we did this to try and do the light, but here's what we have. And at least they also gathered the camera data and so forth that is essential for doing this 3D stuff. So I was not on set, but we did have a capable visual effects supervisor who was guiding that. That makes sense? All right, so first thing to do is I got a model from production. They made a rigged model of Tim Travers, and but I don't know Blender very well, but I do know 3D Studio Max. So I jumped into that. I took the model from Blender, extracted it out, and then I re-rigged it for 3D Studio Max using Biped. And this is, and then I went through and I match moved what, let's see if I can maximize this here. So I have the plate in the back, and I just roughly match moved what he's doing.
Wow, and full rotomation.
And it's not super accurate, but I don't need it to be super accurate because the fire is going to be all around him. So I don't need it to be pixel perfect. I just need the motion to be roughly the same. And I completely ignored his coat because I was not going to be doing cloth simulations on this particular shot, again, because the fire is going to be hiding most of it. So we can get away with doing some loose rotomation here. And then I had to go back through and look at it from different vantage points to make sure that the animation felt correct. Because if any of you have done kind of rotomation, if you just do it from the camera, things can get really wonky really fast because it looks good in the camera and then it doesn't look good in physical space. And because we are working with a fluid simulation, his whole body needed to be at least relatively believable as far as how he's moving in space and where he's moving in space. Once I had that done, that took about a day, maybe a little less than a day to rig it up and then match move it. And then I took his rigged skin here, and I exported it out as an Alembic file. And I took that Alembic file. I decided to go and try Embergen, which was not quite in release state yet. It was in its late beta state. And Embergen, if you haven't heard of it, is a near real-time fluid dynamics solver. And that means that it's kind of tailored toward games and real-time stuff, but it's robust enough that you can use it for film and television. It's just really, really fast, and that means that you can iterate really, really quickly as you're designing the what the fire looks like. And so I brought, you're able to bring in FBX files or ABC files, the Alembic files, and you can bring it in, and then you assign the mesh as an emitter and as a collider to the simulation. And it'll start here in a second. I had a bit of a crazy pre-roll.
A quick question about Embergen. Is it so is this like a standalone, or because it's a solver, can it like plug into like other host apps like Houdini or whatever? Could you use it as like a
It's a standalone simulator, but you can export out to VDB files. So you can take the result and bring it into Houdini or any other products that support VDB volumes. Okay. So you can see this is not running real time because my simulation is turned up really high as far as the voxel density of the fluid simulation. So it's not real time, but it is effectively playing back fast enough that I can see what's going on. And I don't have to go through Houdini or Chaos's Phoenix or another fluid simulator, which would, the iteration times would have been too long for me to wait for them to see whether they're working or not. So I was able to take this and a couple of technical points on this. For the simulation part, so you can see here I'm importing the geometry for stuff. This one is Tim. This one is the background and the pole. This goes into the emitter and the collider, and then a turbulence is thrown in. And then in the simulation, I actually had to, I'm explaining this because this is going to be important a little bit later. I had to turn the time step up. So I'm not simulating at 24 frames a second. I'm simulating at 120 frames a second. And that is because Tim is moving so fast that at 24 frames a second, it wasn't able to sample the substeps as his arms and so forth were moving, that it could keep the fire emitting properly and also advecting properly. So I needed to increase the amount of steps that it was sampling at so that it would follow everything appropriately.
Did you just go by the rule of you turn it up until you do as little as you can get away with, or did you have
I turned it up until it started working, but I did it by by whole values. So I went to 48, and then from there I went to 72, then 96, until it started to feel right. And I wanted to make sure that I was at a whole step because I was going to eventually have to retime the output. Really good tip. Back to 24 frames a second. And so I didn't want to be having values of 4.8 sounds like a good one. I just wanted to be like, I'm saving this out at 5 times the length of what I need. And I'm going to bring it into the comp, and I'm going to retime that fire back down to a fifth of that size. So I wanted those kind of whole values to work appropriately. And then I also brought in the camera as an Alembic. So I was going to be rendering it from the camera so that it matched what I needed in the comp. And what Embergen can do is in the render, you can set the additional AOVs for the render. So I have the render all, so I have the fire and the smoke, but then I also have another pass, which is the emissive, which is what is being illuminated and scattered through. And then I have a smoke mask, and I have a flames mask, and I have the temperature, and I have different mask shapes. And all of these are being saved into a multi-layer EXR file. So they're being smashed into this EXR file. Then I can then either shuffle out in Nuke to grab that particular pass, or shuffle it out in Extractor in After Effects. but that meant that I had a lot more control over the fire than just the fire and smoke pass. So I could make the fire glow a little bit more, or I could make the smoke darker or lighter, and I didn't have to have a whole bunch of additional passes rendered that I had to keep track of, and I had that control still.
That's great. I have a question from Artificial. What are your machine specs, just to kind of get an idea of what you work with?
This is a different machine. But the machine I was working on, I think, had 64 gigs of RAM and dual processor. It was an HP Z6, I think. And what I'm running on now is a little bit less than that. It has more RAM. So I have 128 gigs of RAM in here, but the processing power is a little bit less than what I had. I have multiple terabytes of storage, and then I think I have an A6000 in here for the graphics card, and NVIDIA A6000 with 32 gigs of RAM. But I don't think that Embergen is accelerated by the graphics card. I could be wrong on that, but those are rough specs of it.
Excellent. No, that's perfect.
So it's a pretty beefy machine. It's not the beefiest I've ever seen, but it seems to do okay.
No, wonderful. Thank you.
Yeah, you bet. So then, I have this fire, and I have Tim, the passes of Tim, the plate, and so then I needed to start processing the plate. And I'm coming from movies, so a lot of my stuff is done in Nuke, so forgive that. But all of this can be done in After Effects as well. Like, I first denoise the plate, and the reason for that, generally in normal film workflows, you don't want to denoise the entire plate for your final. You want to retain the original negative, essentially, even though it's a digital file, we still call it a negative, but you still want the original grain structure. And so you try and retain that, and then you grain the CG elements to match the original grain. That's the film workflow when you want to try and retain what the DP's intent was for choosing that particular film stock or that particular chip or ISO rating, or you want to make it look like the original camera acquisition. In this particular case, I wasn't worried about it because, first of all, we were shooting on a Venice 2, I think this was 5K, 5.7K. And so the grain structures are super tiny, and it wasn't really a consideration. So I decided to just denoise the entire plate and then plan to renoise it after at the end of the comp. So basically stripping everything off and then putting it all back on after the comp is done. The other reason for that is that, as you're going to see, there's going to be a lot of glows and flares and all kinds of stuff that's going to pollute this frame, and trying to retain the grain through that, it gets a little bit messy. So I made a clean plate, and I then rotoed Tim. And the reason why I choose Nuke to do that is because when I separate him out into roto shapes and start moving them around, Nuke is really good at retaining the motion blur of the shapes. And I generally tend not to use things like RotoBrush or Mocha rotoscoping tools because I like to have control over my roto shapes, even though it might take a little bit longer to set up. I like the fact that I don't have a gazillion points in my roto shapes, and or no points in the case of some roto tools. It's just like, especially the newer AI ones, where it's just like, yeah, just roto this, and then it comes out like crap, and then I can't adjust it, and then I'm like, oh, what do I just run it again and see if it works? I would much rather just spend a little bit of time making this a little bit cleaner so that I have fewer shapes to manipulate, and I can control where those shapes are going so that the motion blur happens. I'm going to use this roto in After Effects later. But the reason is that I wanted to be able to grade Tim so that it looked like the fire was illuminating him. And so that was something that came on later after I slapped the fire on him. There was too much contrast in it. So I decided, okay, well, we need to grade him so it looked like he was illuminated. I also did the fire retime in Nuke because I like the O-Flow and Chronos tools more in there. I just know how they work. But you can see here, this is the fire setup, which you can't see anything. But if you shuffle through these, I'm actually shuffling the different passes out of this. So there's nothing here. But if you look at the different passes in it, you have the emissive pass. Let's see. Okay. Is it going to show me? I may have to just, oh, there we go. So there's the emissive and scattering, and there's the mask for the flames. There's that's the alpha for the 3D model. You can see the rigging is awful. But you also have a temperature pass, which so you have all of these kind of mashed into the EXRs, and I can shuffle those out. Let's go back to here, and I could grade these, and then I retime it here, and I had to do a little bit of manipulation of the timing to match up to where Tim was on the background plate, but it gave me I rendered out individual passes of the retimed smoke and the retimed fire, which I would then bring into After Effects. So let's go into, did I skip a step here? No, I don't think so. All right. So now we're in After Effects, and I have my background plate here. And I'm going to turn off a few things.
Todd, can you explain why you were compositing in Nuke and then went into After Effects after that?
I was doing test comps in Nuke just to kind of validate validate that what I was doing was going to work once I got over to After Effects. So the reason I did I explained why I did the rotoscoping in Nuke. The retiming I'm just more familiar with the O-Flow pipeline, the optical flow pipeline in Nuke. And so it was going to be faster for me to do that than to come into After Effects and use one of the retimers in After Effects, the optical flow kind of retiming there, because it was a new tool that I would need to figure out how to use. So it was going to be faster for me to just do it in Nuke and then spit it out as a pass and then bring it into After Effects.
I do really admire that you're all about the shot, what it needs, and mixing that with your skill set and time left over. I feel like that those are all really good things to know, especially when you're being, on a show where your creativity gets ratcheted higher in the hierarchy of importance. You're able to say, you know what, I'm going to use what works for this right here, then move to the next thing instead of trying to learn something new in this instance.
Yeah, and there are cases where where I will be like, you know what, this shot could maybe use this tool that I've never used before, and I will do that if the time allows me to do it, because I like learning new stuff. I have nothing against the retiming tools in After Effects. It's just that I don't know them as well, and that will probably change it at some point when I have time. Did that answer the question?
Absolutely.
Yeah, thanks. It's like really cool that you like like people, you know, I hear people saying like, oh, do you use Nuke or After Effects? And so it's kind of cool that you're doing this like combination of them, where like these tools and these tools, and that's really cool.
I like the answer is I use Nuke and After Effects.
Yeah, I love that answer.
All right, so we're back to the comp. Now this is just a pre-comp. Eventually I'm going to use Red Giant Supercomp for this, and I'll dive into that as quickly as I can. But what I'm doing here is I'm doing a pre-comp that's doing all of the stuff that is essentially the background plate for the Supercomp. So I want to do everything before the Supercomp that doesn't need to be part of the Supercomp. So I'll show you what that entails. So here's the background plate, and then here is me grading Tim up. I'm using the mask that I generated from Nuke as my track mat for the plate that I then adjusted the levels on and the color balance to get him to look like that. And then I took my fire, and there's actually two fires. There's him on fire, but there's the blast of fire that comes out that ignites him. So I have two fires going on. And what I needed reflections of the fire in the ground. And so let's see. There it is. So this is just that fire element, and it is scaled. It's flopped basically. So I scaled it on the negative y-axis, so that I'm creating a pseudo reflection on the ground. And I have both Tim on fire's reflection, and I have the reflection of the fire blast. And then I took that and I used a track mat from the plate, and I mixed that in maybe with Illumimat. So I mixed that in, so I'm using the texture of the plate to break up the reflection, so that it would look like it was dirty, so that it wasn't just a mirror surface. Does that,
really good
that
tip.
make sense?
Mm-hmm.
So I took this and did a Illumimat so that all of these brighter areas would shine through more, and the darker areas would kind of make this mottled look. And so if I turn the track mat off, then that's what it would look like. Track mat has a roto shape in it for the rest of it. But you can see that using that track mat subsides all of, or subdues all of that, and kind of pushes it into the surface of the floor.
Now, you were talking about the reflection earlier. I'm excited for you to become familiar with the VFX suite reflection and shadow.
Oh, okay.
It's a very fun, quick interface to do a reflection of a character, blur them out, and then select a layer that can act as a displacement map for the
nice
of that.
Cool. I will check that out. So all of this is now the background plate for the Supercomp, because the Supercomp is not going to None of this is a layer. It's all kind of in the background. And the Supercomp is made to blend all of our layers together and wrap light around things and blend edges, and none of this stuff needed that. So I didn't need Supercomp to be working overtime to do these elements. So I did a pre-comp of this and then fed this into the Supercomp layer. And for those of you who are unfamiliar, and I'm only somewhat familiar with Supercomp, so I'll do my best to kind of figure out how to explain this. So Supercomp is like a wrapper around your comp. So all of the layers that you have below the Supercomp acts here as a layer unto itself, and it envelops the layers beneath it, and then it handles all of the comp kind of internally to Supercomp. And so I have my background plate, which is this pre-comp, and I have my retimed fire, and I have my retimed smoke for Timo on fire. I have my fire blast, and then I have my foreground layer. So you can see I have a mat around here for my foreground layer. So this is just the background plate with a mask on it, comped on top. So if I go into the Supercomp here, and this fire example is the real reason why I decided to use Supercomp was because Stu Mashowitz, who developed this, he's been a visual effects supervisor and visual effects guy for a long time at ILM and at the orphanage, and he started developing these Red Giant tools. And the Supercomp is great because he took his knowledge from doing shots like this and made it into a little more easier, user-friendly way of putting it together without getting too much into the mathematical weeds of it all. And the problem with fire is that fire is both an additive thing and it is a subtractive thing. So when we're comping, we're generally doing it in a subtractive type of way. The foreground goes on top of the background, but if you're doing it optically, you'd have to punch a hole in, you'd have to subtract a hole in the background in order to put the foreground in. And so you're eliminating the background pixels in lieu of the foreground pixels being put on top of it. That's the subtractive method. That's just kind of an A over B type of way of doing it. An additive comp is when you have light or flares or something along those lines in the shot where you're switching your mode in After Effects terminology. You're switching your mode to screen, or is it additive or is it
add? Yeah.
Add.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so you're taking the value of the foreground and you're adding it to the pixels of the background. So you're brightening it up. And that is partially because when you see through things that are illuminated, you're compounding what you're seeing. It's not being occluded. You're seeing through it to the background. And fire is both of those things at the same time. The core of the fire gets thick enough that it becomes subtractive, but the kind of fiery bits on the outside is translucent enough that when it gets thin, you can see what's in back of it. And so you can't take a bit of fire. This is a common thing. If you take a fire element, for example, like I want to put a campfire in here, and you take a fire element and you put it into your shot as an additive element, then it doesn't look right because you can see through the entire thing. You actually have to take the fire and then contract the matte and then duplicate the comp so that the core is subtractive and you don't see through it, but then you add the fire on top of itself as an additive to make it so that you're combining the two. It gets really, really complicated and really finicky to finesse. And so in this particular case, in Supercomp, Stu has already set up presets for different kinds of things like this. So you have, let's see, I made my particular recipes for these things. Look at it's even like switching between these. But you have these different presets that he has already set up. So hazy, mist, and rays, and you can actually see it's kind of auditioning these things for you. And it basically,
love this about being in Supercomp. It's so fun.
Takes all of the layers that you have in your After Effects comp, and you're now ignoring the layers that are in the comp because you're comping it inside of Supercomp. So we have the background layer here, and then the fire retimed had these. Let's see if I can. These change, by the way. So this layer, I told it that it's an additive layer. So it reduces the amount of options that I have because it is additive and not subtractive. And so, or an over or a normal type of comp. So now in my presets here, I think it changes. Yeah, so you have, here's my fire, my custom fire, but here's a big fire and a bonfire and an explosion core. And so he's provided these presets to get a start with. So if you choose big fire or one of these, it gives you this list of, these are all filters right here. So this is a color correction filter, and this is the heat blur. So it's taking the blur from the fire and throwing that in there. And then this is your core map. This is determining where that subtractive and additive component is going to be. And then there's an optical glow around that. So you can see that this optical glow is fairly broad because I made this really, really much more dramatic than it probably would be in real life. Then the smoke has similar types of things, but different filters. So each one of these, again, for color correction of the smoke, and there's a light wrap, which is using what's behind it, which is the fire, to wrap the fire into the smoke, the glow of the fire. Then this is blurring behind. So this is blurring the background behind the smoke. And then a reverse light wrap is, maybe Chad, you can explain that a little bit better. The reverse light wrap is subtracting.
Yeah, it's like the opposite of a glow in a way. Like if you had the sun shining on a stormtrooper's helmet in Star Wars, it's going to reflect a bunch of light out almost as if glowing, but it's more a result of the cameras getting back.
So the glow is the outside of the object, where the light wrap is the inside of the object. The light wrap wraps around the object, and the reverse light wrap would add a glow outside of the mat of the object. Then I have my big fire, my fireball, which has its own set of filters, which emulates our Tim fire, just with different values. And then it adds the foreground on top of that, but I'm adding a light wrap and a haze and a volume fog, which is all taking the elements of these comps together and then adding that to this layer. So all of the fire and the glows and the light wraps and all of that kind of stuff is contributing. It's compounding on one another to the point where all of these light wraps and hazes and so forth are taking the values from what's underneath and then mixing them in all to that. Now I am working in video space. I don't know if mathematically that's the correct way to do it, but it was coming out okay because I have actually a LUT on top of everything. So I can comp over here, but I can see the end result over here.
Precisely. And one of the things that Supercomp has as an option is you can mix and match raw and compressed color spaces into one, and then choose what Supercomp outputs, the raw or the interpolator.
And you have just a slew of all of the standard camera LUTs in here to choose from also, which is great. I don't remember this being in here the first time I used this. So maybe it's been updated since a year ago. And so this particular tool is what helps me get to this point so fast. I would still probably be wrestling with it, and it still wouldn't look as good if I had tried to do a homegrown version of this shot in Nuke or in After Effects, because I wouldn't have understood really the ins and outs of comping this type of shot. And it turned out good. It turned out dramatic and kind of cool. And I had to do 3 other shots exactly like it. So I'm glad that I was able to establish this workflow with this particular shot, because then I could emulate it for every shot after that. I had to re-rotomate the character, obviously, because he's doing different things. But the recipe, I could dial the recipe in initially, and then I could repurpose that recipe. So in the Supercomp stuff, because I saved out those presets to my custom presets, I could apply what I had done in this shot to the other shots, and then just tweak them a little bit if you were further from the camera or closer to the camera to dial this in a little bit nicer. I think that wraps that shot out. I looked at the dates for this, and I started the shot on the 17th of December, and I delivered the shot on the 23rd. So what is that? 6 days, maybe less if it was over a weekend.
No, that's incredible. And to think, what I love is that you tackled so many parts of what would go into a shot like this. Sometimes depending on what your team size and budget are like, it's like you have a simulation person, or you're waiting for passes so you can be just a compositor on it or just something on this. But
yeah,
I love that you rotomated, you simulated, composited, rendered. It's a lot of things. What a great
I grew up as
set
a
of skills to
generalist
have
in the 90s. So in the 90s, you had to kind of do everything, be able to do everything, or at least have an understanding of everything.
You hear that, kids?
At everything.
Wasn't all this into No, this is good old-fashioned hard work that has built on your wealth of years gaining experience from VFX shots like this.
Yeah,
big and
and
small.
just trying to troubleshoot it. You just had to you didn't have somebody to turn to, and you didn't have the time to go down to the effects department and talk to the effects artist and say, hey, I need a new simulation. And they say, oh, okay, well, that should be done in about 4 days. No, you just need it. You need it now, or you need to fix it. This is this is an interesting conundrum that I run into on big studio stuff, especially working at vendors, is because it's so compartmentalized. You have the comp guys who are going, well, the CG guys didn't give me the right stuff, and they're like, well, did you go talk to the CG guy? Well, no. So I tried to fix it. I spent 3 days trying to fix it, and because he didn't give me this AOV pass, and you're like, well, why didn't you just go ask for the AOV pass and not fix this guy's stuff? Why don't you? And when you're a generalist, you're like, I have to fix my own stuff, or else it's not going to work. So how do I fix it? And what's wrong with it? And do I fix it down the line? Do I fix this in comp? Is it faster to fix it in comp? Or is it faster to just go back to the CG file and re-render it? And those kinds of that balance of where you want to put your effort is very enlightening when you have to do it yourself. I'm
very well
said. Huge proponent of when I was on the vendor side of when somebody in a particular department was in between shows and we wanted to keep him around. It's like, well, let's put him in this department that's upstream from him and make him do and learn what these guys are doing so that they have an understanding of how these elements get to him in comp, or how, if you're in CG and you're lighting, well, how are the texture guys texturing and doing the shader development before it gets to lighting? Because the lighting team generally is lighting, right? Sometimes you do a little bit of shader dev and so forth, but they're receiving an element from this black box that's over here, and they put a light on it, and it's like, this doesn't work at all. I can't do anything with this. But if they were sent to the texture and shading department for 2 weeks and given a task of, here, texture and shade this, then they gain empathy and they gain insight, and they broaden their language base to be able to talk to the texture and shader guys. And so they say, hey, could we maybe make a normal pass in here, or a world position pass, or can you make sure that the shader has that in it, because we'll need that for the compositor. So it's my firm belief that a studio should kind of act as one kind of generalist, that this mind hive should be able to communicate with one another without pointing the fingers that somebody else did something wrong.
Oh, I love that. That's a great, I feel like that's a fantastic message to wrap up on. I think you've been tremendous at answering these questions as they came up. That example was phenomenal. Todd, this was so cool.
Thank you. Usually those of you that have seen the show know that I'm usually just like a chatterbox. I'm always just like, but I'm just like so awestruck. I'm just like, whoa. I'm just like stunned by all this stuff. I mean, I did a really horrible job of introducing you, but I mean, your credits, Todd, are just like astounding. I mean, you're a visual effects supervisor on like Black Panther, Doctor Strange, Avengers: Age of Ultron. Yeah, I mean, the thing.
Yeah.
Say what?
CG supervisor on those ones, but
yeah. Yeah. And like the thing, like if you look you up on IMDb, which I recommend that everyone in the audience does, like look you up on IMDb, and the credits are just like you scroll and you scroll and you scroll. There's just like so many huge movies and TV shows that we all love. So like the wealth of experience that you bring both like on the box and as a supervisor, like is just like astounding. So to hear you talk and to hear like why you're choosing like, you know, Supercomp as a tool to use, and like just hearing your thought process and your flow is just like so fantastic. I mean, I would love for you to come back sometime and keep awing me because this was just like absolutely incredible. But thank you so much for like your time and everything. It's just been absolutely incredible.
Cool. I'm happy to be here and happy to share.
That's awesome.
Excellent. Well, thank you, everyone out there for watching. Feel free to leave cool comments, likes, and subscribes, and all of the good things that make our bosses happy.
And next week we'll have Blake Rizzo, who's been in the comments. Hi, Blake.
Blake Rizzo.
Nice.
He'll be here talking about form in particular, and that'll be a great time as well. So keep the fun going.
Cool.
Amazing.
I'm gonna look through these comments now and see see if anyone's harassing me.
It's all praise.
You're
all
doing
good.
that wrong.
Oh, good. Oh, good. It's been a pleasure. We love you, everybody. Have a
Thanks,
wonderful
everybody.
week.
Bye.
Take care. Sweet.